One of the features introduced in the phase 1 of the changes coming to Dead by Daylight is how perks will appear in the lobby as well as the character selection screen before a match is started. But this does not mean that your teammates will be able to see your perks. So then, what is the point of this feature when you can already see your own perks? Well, Behaviour has actually talked about both of these topics, and I have found the answer to be very interesting, to the point I wanted to make this discussion video, because in my opinion, they are right, and the reasonings they gave are actually very important for the overall health of the game, and is something that a lot of members in the community completely ignore. So why was this feature introduced in the first place? According to Behaviour and their stats, over 10% of new players in Dead by Daylight do not interact with the perk mechanics of the game, meaning that they purchase the game, go into a match, and don't even bother looking into the perks at all, and this for me is absolutely crazy. Now, the statistics itself might not seem that crazy when you take into account that 40% of the Steam player base did not even get a character to level 10, and on PlayStation this number is worse because it's almost 50%, but it makes sense. On Steam, a lot of accounts are players that bought the game once and never bothered with it, or players that never opened it in the first place. The same happens with PlayStation. A lot of players got the game for free in PlayStation Plus, so they probably didn't even bother playing it. So, with this change, new players will see before starting a match that their characters will have one perk already pre-selected in order to make them curious about the perk system. So this is a change purely focused for the newer player experience. But what might be the most interesting out of this is that Behaviour has acknowledged the feature of showing your teammates your perks in SoloQ, and this is still discussed internally by them because it's not a simple feature to introduce. According to them, this mechanic would increase lobby dodging, increase toxicity, and extend queue times overall. And when you think about it, this is completely true. So let's take a look at both sides in order to see why this feature is not as simple as to just program it and that's it. First, let's take a look at the positives of this feature and why it's needed in DBD. Being able to see your teammates' perks would be incredibly useful for those players that want to do team plays in SoloQ, as well as it would make certain team-focused or niche perks significantly better, like Reassurance, Camaraderie, Shoulder the Burden, Head On, Wicked, Deliverance, or Plot Twist. This would also bridge the gap in between SoloQ and Survive with Friends a bit more, which is very needed in order to achieve perfect balance, because the difference between those two roles is very huge. This is one of the biggest reasons why it's impossible to balance the game correctly, because any nerf to Survive with Friends will also affect the SoloQ players. This feature was something that DBD Mobile actually already had. Once a match started, during the loading screen, you were able to see the perks of your teammates, which admittedly was very useful. So this feature makes perfect sense on paper. However, players only take the positives into the equation when talking about this feature, but this can make the overall experience worse for certain types of players. So let's take a look at the negatives of this feature. And the biggest negative by far, and the one that will affect the vast majority of players, is lobby dodging, which is already a problem that the game has had various times. This is the same community which begged Behaviour to remove the prestige icons from the lobby screen in order to reduce lobby dodging. And this is still a problem that happens in the game when you get certain survivors depending on what items they bring or what cosmetics they use, and I am not exaggerating on that last part. On Steam, you can also check the profiles of the players in order to see how many hours they have, and depending on that, you can choose to play or not. So now, imagine being a new player or a casual player, and you have a bunch of tryhards that are telling you that self-care is a horrible perk to run, and that you must change it or else they are not playing. This results in elitist survivors constantly dodging lobbies in order to find matches where everyone is using meta or acceptable perks, So players with no Mitre, invocation perks, or whatever the meta deems useless will have a harder time finding a match. For a lot of players, this is not a big deal, but for the casuals that want a quick match, lobby dodging can be incredibly annoying. Perks like Left Behind, for example, would be completely useless. And let's not forget that this means that those players that dodge will eventually play in a match where all 4 of the survivors are using extremely meta perks, making the match for the killer miserable, while the players that get dodged will play with other players that don't care, so that match would also be easier. You can see this for yourself already. Various players admitted that they would be dodging every single match that has survivors using suboptimal perks, so good luck doing the adepts. Another important feature of this perk showcase system is the ability to turn it off, because having it on at all times would force streamers to go in anonymous mode, because if they don't do that, the killer player can stream snipe the lobby and find out what perks are all the survivors running. I have even seen some players suggesting the ability to turn off the possibility of having your perks shown to others in the lobby, but then what is the point in even programming the system in the first place if there is a button to prevent your teammates from knowing what perks you run? They will still dodge regardless if they cannot see the perks, because they will assume that the perks are bad. It's just not a good idea at all. So we come to the classic of survivors choosing their loadout at the last second like they do with flashlights to prevent killers from using Lightborn. If survivors do that, you might not have enough time to check what perks they bring in the game, especially when they are new. This is also a problem by default if the players are making their loadout during the match, and they have various perk loadouts to choose from. So this is something that some players might do by accident. Now, one can argue that you wouldn't want to play with someone that dodges based on the perks you used, and you would be absolutely right. Of course, the solution to this problem would be making every single perk useful, which is impossible considering that there are over 100 perks in the game, and more are being added every single patch. Another solution I have seen many people suggest is to show the perks during the loading screen, like DBD Mobile did. The thing is that the mobile community is not at all like the one on core, which is significantly more try-hardy. Also, doing this on the loading screen will still let players dodge the match by doing the Alt F4 tactic that is done when an unfavorable offering is used, and it would make dodging more annoying because players expect to enter a match only to find out someone disconnected while loading. So finally, the last solution I have seen that might seem useful is adding the perks in the pause menu while inside a match. This completely fixes the dodge problem, as it would be too late to decide to leave the match. However, let's think about this for a second. You have to pause the game in order to see your perks inside a match, and take your time reading them. For a new player, this might mean possibly reading and memorizing the effects of 12 perks in total, in a game where the killer can be on your location incredibly fast due to lethal pursuer, or because of other factors. It personally makes no sense to have all the perks during the pause screen, because it is not a seamless way to learn about the game. Time is crucial during a match of Dead by Daylight. But another problem that a lot of players completely ignore is a symptom of gaming I would like to call "I ain't reading all of that." And it's pretty simple. Anytime this feature is being talked about, it's done by players that are already invested in Dead by Daylight. Players that know how the vast majority of perks work. Players that actually look at videos from content creators and that would invest their time into making comments on my videos too. If you are commenting on any video of mine, I cannot consider you a true casual, especially if you clicked on this video, which I do not expect to be popular. The true casuals of DBD, and what is the majority of the player base, are players that have zero idea that perks like Plot Twist exist. Those players that might look at these icons and they mean nothing to them. And this goes all the way back to a video I made in 2024. The fact that Dead by Daylight itself is not a beginner-friendly game at all. A system where the perks of your teammates are shown requires a way for players to look at the perks individually in order to learn what they are. Say, one of your teammates has the perk Inner Focus on them, and you have zero idea what it does, unless there is a way for both console and PC players to see the effect of the perk. Knowing that your teammates are using a perk with this icon is completely useless. Without it, the only solution would be to memorize all of the perks in the game, which is a task that is way too much to ask for a casual player, or check the wiki of DBD in order to find who that perk belongs to and what it does before the match starts, which is only a 1-minute timer. That's not even taking into account that now, before a match starts, these players have to remember which survivor had what perk, and in low MMR lobbies, a lot of survivors are repeated with barely any cosmetic differences. Also, even if you know the icon of a perk, that doesn't mean that you know the version of the perk, as sometimes new patches completely change the effects of certain perks, like Predator. So you have to be up to date constantly with what each perk in DBD does in order for this to be useful for you. If you don't believe how bad this can be, try to play with someone who has zero idea about Dead by Daylight and explain to them the effects of your perks or the perks of the killer while in a match. As you can imagine, it is a very annoying thing to do. And the reason why I put so much importance on this topic is because a lot of the community which interacts with content creators or the DBD subreddit or the DBD forums completely ignore the fact that the true casuals of DBD are extremely important for the health of the game, and Behaviour knows this, which is why they finally started working on a Project Health, because they know that once that FNAF DLC drops, a lot of new players, some potentially being children, will start playing the game because Springtrap is on there. And let's not forget the fact that a lot of players simply do not want to learn the game. They just want to pick it and play it. The best example of that is the new Skull Merchant, which is objectively the worst killer in the game by far currently. Yet a lot of survivors still don't know what to do against her, and they don't want to even learn the counterplay of this killer. Why? Because they don't. So expecting all SoloQ players to know the effects of perks like Head On, Camaraderie, Deliverance, or other teamwork based perks is impossible. I don't expect a lot of players to know what Shoulder the Burden is. For example, this is the dilemma that Behaviour currently has. On one hand, we have a feature that will help dedicated and high MMR SoloQ players a lot, potentially making the SoloQ experience significantly better overall. But then, we have the problems of toxic players dodging non-meta perks or telling people which perks to run, as well as the entire problem of casuals getting saturated with the amount of variables and perks that the game has, which they have to memorize, which is just too much, which leads to two issues. Either players will drop the game because they find it too complicated for what is supposed to be a casual hide-and-seek horror experience, and they leave the game in order to play something simpler, or they just ignore this feature, which leads to the same frustrations players have now, but now with the added problem of a toxic player potentially dodging or telling the new players that the perks they are using are bad. Just as a reminder, the same patch that introduced the Freddy Krueger rework also made it so that the mending bar was located on the bottom part of your character, and this was done because some casuals didn't know anything about the mending mechanic. This just shows that the majority of the player base are casuals, and the devs need to make changes that do not ignore these types of players, which are important to the overall health of DBD. And this is the reason why I made this video in the first place, because when a lot of players have balanced discussions about DBD, they take into account the fact that the viewers already know every single perk, every single add-on, every single map, every single killer. Basically, if someone is watching a video from a content creator, that player is significantly more invested compared to a father who just wants to play the game as Ellen Ripley, escaping killers like Freddy Krueger one day in the evening. So what solution is there to this system? Well, it's a complicated solution that requires a lot of changes to be made into the game. I still think that showing the perks to your teammates is a good change that should happen at some point in the future. Yes, the toxicity and dodging can be a problem in the game, and it will be a problem with this feature, but it's a pick your poison choice, and I think the improvement of the games thanks to this feature is worth it in order to bridge the gap between Survive with Friends and SoloQ. But this would only be a feature worth for players that are engaged with DBD. The best change Behaviour could do with DBD is making the tutorials and the new player experience better, which is the true problem of the game. The reason why 10% don't know about the perk system is because the game itself is not explained to new players. There is no tutorial to guide a new player into the mechanics of the game, as they have to manually click on the blood web in order to have it explained for you. Everything should be clearly explained for a player, as if that player is very dumb. Dead by Daylight should be a game where players have everything explained to them in a seamless way. Videos showcasing how perks or killers work inside the game, like Marvel Rivals does, instead of having players enter a custom match in order to see all the perks in the game and read all over 100 of them, or going to the DBD wiki or a 3-hour long Oddsdarva perk tier list. 2 vs 8 is a fantastic showcase of what a true casual mode is, and why it's important to have one like this in game. There are no 100 perks to learn about, as the classes are well explained and you can see them while queuing for a match. There are no weird niche killers like Twins, Sadako or Knight in the game, as all the killers are massively popular and simple, and the aura reveal is told to survivors instead of them having to guess that perks like Lethal Pursuer or Nowhere to Hide are in play. 2 vs 8 is so popular because of its simplicity, which is something that the core mode of DBD lacks. Regarding the perk showcase, I think another solution that would be interesting, and it would prevent dodging as well as having players telling you what perks to use, is to have a ping system implemented in the game by default. As a survivor, there should be a way for you to choose one of your perks in the loadout and reveal that perk to everyone in the game. For example, the moment a survivor is hooked, you can choose to show your teammates that you have shouldered the burden before you unhook a survivor so they can leave you to do it. The same can be done with other perks. You can show your teammates that you have Unbreakable while you're slugged, so they can ignore you on the ground. Or while on a hook, you can choose to showcase that you have Deliverance in order for them to let you unhook a survivor and then let you hang on the hook if the killer is proxy camping, so you can escape by yourself and so they can focus on generators. There are so many uses of this system that would be very useful in game, showing head-on so your SoloQ teammates can plan on bringing the killer to you, showing that you have power struggle so they leave the pallet up. And remember the issue of players not knowing what the icons of the perks are? That's where the solution of the pause menu can be implemented. Anytime a survivor decides to showcase their perk to their teammates, they can pause the menu in order to read what the perk does. Of course, this comes with the problem of making the game more complex, so this feature needs to be indicated to the players via the tutorial, so they know that this system exists. Have survivors reveal their perks in the tutorial to their bot friends, and also have survivors have to read the description of a perk in the pause menu so they know that this is something that can be done. So let's compare this solution to the other one. On one hand, we have the perks in the lobby reveal, which comes with various problems. It might incentivize dodging lobbies, it might not be enough for new players to understand what the perks the teammates are using, it makes stream sniping worse for survivors in lobbies with a streamer, it requires a way for players to know the effects of the perks of the survivors, some players might choose a perk loadout at the last second, preventing players from knowing exactly what perks they have. If the perks are shown on the pause menu, having to pause the game as a new player is clunky and not viable during a match, and survivors have to memorize which players had what perks before the match begins. And the only advantage of this mechanic is that it's pretty simple to do, requires no gameplay changes, as well as it not being intrusive to the match and immersion of Dead by Daylight. With my ping solution, every single of these problems are solved at the cost of it being more complex. Now, lobbies cannot be dodged, as you can choose what perks to reveal to your teammates if you want to and when. New players can take a bit more time to read what perk you pinged means, so they know what to do, going from potentially 12 perks per match to only 1 per survivor at a time. Killers cannot know the builds of every survivor in the match before the match starts due to stream sniping. It doesn't matter if you choose your loadout at the last second, since the system works while in-game. And this mode incentivizes teamwork while in-game, since the ping system is something interactive, unlike having the perks shown at the start. So survivors don't have to memorize anything, since this system is dynamic. The moment a survivor is logged, they can reveal that they have Unbreakable. Let me know in the comments what you think about everything discussed in this video, and if you find this solution to be something you would be interested in seeing in the game. Remember that this video was purely a discussion only, and not a way as to offer feedback to the devs, as I am not a game designer. Thank you for watching, and have a nice day.